Okay, let me tell you about a story from I think it was a few years ago. Let's keep it to that. I was working at a company, and we built a R&D project which still needed a bunch of funding. We had funding, but we needed to like push features for funding for the next year. You know what I'm saying? So the original application had a mobile front end and a Java backend. And that Java backend doesn't even matter that it's Java for those who want to make fun of it. Uh, the point was there was an anonymous entry in it, and it should be like people should be on the application, should go to log in without doing anything because, well, taking away hurdles. So what we did was we wanted to keep track of what the preferences were. So on the client side, or we generated a ID, just an anonymous UUID, and we hold the preferences and we stored the UUID on the mobile phone. So every time, well, when you're on that device, we can still connect you to what's ever happening. We could do some pre-processing on the server side, and we could give you some information on that. It was about buildings, properties. Uh, During the time of development, there was a new ID. People could claim a property if the property was them, from if they owned it and they want to enhance it with pictures, a description. They want to say it's for rent or for sale or something like that in that context. So what we did, because it was a rush job and we still needed to do that before the end of the year, it was like October. You get me? We put that in, and what we did was in that profile server, we said like, oh, if you want to claim a property, because there was a free available database. Uh, yeah, the property can only be claimed once, so we need to have a secure login with an email and a password. So we added that to that profile server, no biggie, and then you could claim a property. The point only was that property, that my home service or my property service that we had, that also had a fetching get request. So with that get request, you could basically call all the properties that were claimed by a user. Only what we did is you had the domain object property, which had a connection to the UUID of the user, which is still no biggie, but the JSON output had that UUID in it, and we didn't actually use it in the front end. But if you combined that UUID and together with that anonymous login that we already have, used your UUID in that anonymous login, so you would be able to get the enhanced profile, because the enhanced profile now contained not just only a UUID and a preferences array, but also an email address. So that means that at that point in time, somebody could be able, with two or more requests, could connect a physical property, so the address of a physical property, together with an email address. By law nowadays, that's a GDPR problem. That's basically PII data that comes into the open. And the horrible thing was we found the problem because somebody reported it to us anonymously, so we didn't know what's happening. Like, okay, look it up, and we fixed it within between maybe 10 minutes. But the problem was afterwards. Like, we pushed it to production, everything was fine, and then higher level management comes up to you, like, who was involved? How long was it there? Who was actually breached? But because it was an R&D project and there was so much pressure on it, we didn't have proper logging. We didn't know what actually was happening. We only could measure load. So we had to make up a story, like how many people are like breached, and that was just, we think it's kind of like this. So let's say 80% of the total user base. Luckily, it was still in a beta product, but that faced me like the actual problem is not so much fixing the problem, is not so much the issue, but the paperwork, how you have to deal with it afterwards, and also how people think of you. But because then higher level management on one side put pressure on you, like, do you have to deliver? And then afterwards they say, it's such a shame you're not security aware. And that made me kind of sad and angry at the same time. So uh, yeah, we found out that taking good care of whatever information you're leaking was now part of our protocol, but we didn't have any security people within the team. So it was an interesting way of finding out how you have to deal with these kind of things. And how things go afterwards.
Brian, now you
Yeah,
remember this incident always. So you remember to keep security in mind always, right?
absolutely. But I think at that point in time, it was because there's a lot of pressure from your program manager or product manager on it. We need to deliver this feature because funding is, well, we don't have funding yet for next year. Uh, it is something we have to take care of it like altogether. It's not just people are measuring you on features and not so much if you are secure or not. But if you're not secure, it's like an implicit thing. Then they do blame you, and that was like that doesn't feel fair to me. And well, besides all the reports you had to fill in and all the paperwork you had to be doing, that took a lot of time, and I was not sure how much funding we had for the next year, to be fair, because of that incident.
Sure. I've actually got a bunch of them. So I could easily go through 10 or so. There's a few in my mind that stick out. So I'm just going to randomly select one of those to talk about. But when I left high school years and years ago, I went to the University of California in Santa Cruz for computer science education. And I don't feel bad sharing this because it was so long ago. Like everyone involved is way, way out of there. So I don't feel bad at all. But at the time when I was at the school, I was doing an internship and I was working as a software developer in Cold Fusion, which I cannot stand writing Cold Fusion, by the way, for our university's campus housing website. And so essentially, this is the website where if you were a student who lived on campus, you had to go through this official portal to apply for housing every year. And you could say, like, I want to live in the dormitories or I want to live in the on-campus apartments. They had all these different, options. And because it was directly owned by the school, all the housing, you had sort of like a application process you would go through in this website. And that was like the main functionality of the site, was to do the applications for housing and then also to check your status and then coordinate like loans or payments with like parents and family members and all those types of things. And so when I joined, one of the things they had me work on, the biggest project, was they said, hey, we're in the process of revamping this application process and we'd love for you to essentially like refactor the Cold Fusion software to make it better. And this was like thousands and thousands of, tangled lines of code. It was not pretty. So one of the first things I did is I took a look at the onboarding flow. And the way that it worked is, and this is the flow I actually used, by the way, because I was living on campus at the time. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be a user experience expert on this thing. So you go to the page, and what it asked you for is a ton of information to like log into your account. And the stuff it asked you for was like your last name, your first name, your social security number, which in the US is like a very private piece of information that like, you are assigned at birth essentially. And like you need this throughout your life for a lot of important things. So your social security number, and like some other various things, like I think like address was on there and stuff. And that's how it verified your identity to allow you to like actually create an account and go through this process. Well, and by the way, it was a similar type of thing for actually logging in. So it didn't just have a username and a password or anything like that. You had to input all of your official government information to actually get into the website. So I thought that was really weird, but I got it. It was like part of a campus thing, and like they have all this identity proofing built into it. So I thought, okay, this makes sense. Well, the very first thing I realized was that when you logged in on the server side, it actually ignored all of those fields. The only ones that it paid attention to were first name and last name. That was it. And so what would happen is it would actually just say, hey, if you're logging in, your name is Randall Deggs, which, is my name. It would just find any students whose name was Randall Deggs and show you all of their information. And once you got into the portal, you could apply for housing, you could take loans out, you could see your social security number like fully there without any sort of like asterisk characters or, anonymization, anything like that. There was a ton of personal information in there. And so I reported this like as soon as I could to my boss at the time. And I said, hey, I'm new here and I'm definitely not an expert in this, but I think there might be a slight issue. And he took a look at it and said, oh, we've actually known about that for quite a while. But, you know, it'll take a while to get updated. And I said, okay, you know, is there anything I can do to help? He said, no, we'll just not worry about it. I said, all right. So a couple weeks passed by and I noticed the issue still wasn't fixed. So I also raised it to my boss again. I said, hey, you know, just FYI, I looked up one of my roommates in the portal and look, I'm able to log into his account and see all of his personal information. And I didn't need any information except for his first name and his last name. I feel like that might be a slight issue. And he said, oh yeah, you know, it's still getting fixed. Don't worry about it. Like, it's totally fine. I said, oh, all right, no problem. And shortly after that, I actually left the job because I got an off-campus internship that paid a lot more money. And so I was only working there for maybe 6 months or so. But a year later, I logged back in and they had the exact same issue. And so when I actually left the university, they still had the issue at the time. They don't anymore, of course, but at the time, it was 2 years after I started working there, and it was exactly the same. So I think the moral of that story is, especially, or one of the things I learned is that sometimes security is not a priority for different places, even if it's something that's like critically important or feels critically important. And that sucks. And that's one of the reasons I sort of got into the security space, is because I thought this is crazy. There should be better ways to, like, you know, make applications secure for users. And you can have these serious side effects where people could like have their identity stolen or like stalking, or I'm sure a million terrible things without it. And so, yeah, that's one of my security horror stories.
It's crazy. If someone was listening to this and they were maybe an intern at a different university and found an issue and brought it up to their manager or boss, and they had the same sort of feedback on like, don't worry, we're dealing with it, would you have approached it any other way, knowing what you know now, or would you have kind of finished your internship and still left?
I don't think so, personally. I think, you know, especially when you're new to things, like, you know, you should definitely raise a red flag and say, hey, this is a problem. We should get on this. And you can obviously impart some sense of urgency into whoever you're speaking with. But at the end of the day, if it's something that you cannot control, like, in my personal humble opinion, the best thing to do is not stress yourself out too much about it. But if you're in a position where you can control things, or where you're able to make an impact and positively improve those things, like, you should just do whatever you can to make a difference and leave things better than you found it. And so that's a guiding principle that I really enjoy.
So did anyone actually do anything malicious while you were there, or did you hear of anything happen maliciously with that vulnerability?
Only me, because I showed it to all my friends and I said, guys, this is hilarious. Look at what you can do through the campus website. Like, they haven't fixed this and it's been 2 years, you know?
Great, Randall. That's great.
But I was the only one. And it was just with my limited group of roommates that I showed them all for fun, because I pulled up my roommate Ryan's information. I was like, Ryan, we know exactly where you live now, buddy. You know, but it was just a joke. So nothing too crazy.
Now, especially when you are in security team, you have to you see a lot of such kind of cases. So something happened wherein I was taking care of security for a company, and what we did, we hired a person from network team because they had good idea about firewalls and everything. So we thought that person would be a great fit for security team, because that person is good at firewalls and he understands the network architecture really well. Now we pulled this person in. Now, when we talk about security team generally work in a way that, okay, you are working on this piece of item, you will be working, and then rest of the other things, especially access management, will be done by the IT team or the administration team, which seems to be fine. Okay. Now, when this person moved, the team did not make sure that the role mapping is done properly. So this person had all the access of network firewalls and everything. And now when this person came to this team, ideally, the network firewall person was supposed to, at that point of time, monitor or change the rule sets. And now This person is supposed to check the logs, understand where exactly attackers are coming from, or what are the things which are happening. One fine day, we were facing certain issues with applications. Now, we were just discussing in the team meeting. This person said, wait, let me check. This person went ahead, checked it, changed some settings in the firewall, and boom, we were able to access. Now, this was a classic case that it was helpful for us. But if you think that if this person moves to any other team, he'll be taking all of the accesses along and can do wonders with all of that. And nobody will be able to stop that. Now, we had to work along and make the teams understand that we need to have this kind of a role. That was fixed. The access was good. After a few days, a person from the offensive security team left the organization to just go ahead with joining another team. Now, that was fine. Offboarding was done because it was just a 1 month notice period. This person left. Happily, we did a farewell. After 15 days, this person pings me on the chatting software that we use. Like, this person left 15 days back. How come this person is actually pinging? And we realized that the access was never removed. Think of an access, a person from a security team who has all the whitelisting and whatnot access, because you're supposed to test the organization, have access to all the printers and whatnot. We literally found so many issues in the printers and cameras where we could so we loved that table tennis. So this person actually found out that the camera was wide open and it was using the default passwords. So now this person knows everything, that the default passwords are also not fixed. So this person can do anything and everything. And the access is also not being removed. So we literally had to fight, like within the same day, we had to get all the access management reviews, rules checked and whatnot, so that this should never be repeated. Now, this was with the security team. But if this would have happened with other teams, where things could have gone wrong, like literally. Now, these are the office stories. I have some horror stories at home as well, wherein I always keep my device encrypted. Even my phones are like with password protected 8-digit passcode. But then I have shoulder surfers at home who just peep in, check the password, and then done. So I have a little monster who keeps doing that. Whenever I just miss to use my fingerprints or facial, he just comes in and sees the password and try. Every 15 days without missing, I have to change my password. And then comes one fine day, we are sitting in the whole gathering of friends and family, and he asks them, do you know mama's password? And I'm like, okay, wait. And suddenly he blurps the code, and I'm like, I'm done. So we had to educate this kid. We will not share passwords. We will never tell anyone passwords. Do you share your toothbrush with anyone? He says, no. Then why do you share your password? Your passwords are like toothbrushes. Your passcodes are like toothbrushes. Never ever share. Never ever look at anyone's password. So it's like we're trying to educate, but it's very hard to manage these kind of stories at home as well.
I'd be curious to know how many breaches have happened because someone's little monster, as you say, accidentally shared something or did something. Because you're right, they're just over your shoulder looking.
So here's the real question: how do we teach a young child how to start using 1Password to have randomly generated, super long 40-character alphanumeric passwords for every website they use? That's the real question I want to know.
with two-factor authentication.
Of course.
See, the fun fact is that what I feel is that doing some exercises, telling them, if you don't do this, this could go wrong. Especially I've seen parents in India, they have a passcode, even if you have locked the door and you're not, like, parents are not inside. They ask for, tell me your password and then only I'll let you in. All of those things. Similarly, now the kids are on internet all the time. They understand that, yes, these are the things I need to see. So parents have started making them understand that, oh, if you don't do it, this will happen. This could go wrong. So it's very, very important to train their mind in a way that if you don't do this, there are people who are going to catch hold of you and your information. And why information is important? It's very, very important. Like it's very key to know, because if someone gets into your account, they can upload pictures, share pictures. And why you don't need to share pictures? All of that, I think parents are becoming more aware and trying to share this information. And why we need to have like multiple locks in a house, all of those things, probably with the stories they understand now.
So then Dana, back to your company story real quick, but how did you all end up building like an offboarding flow or something like that? Or how did you end up resolving that credential issue? Because that's a really challenging thing to do, I think. Like I've run into that almost everywhere I've worked, and it's a hard problem to solve, I feel like.
Absolutely. We had to manage each architecture that they were building. We had to work with them very closely, sit down, properly document each and everything. Even for the fun fact, we started picking up the projects for the cloud, because we were having a lot of applications. They were going on cloud and everyone was doing their own work. And how much secure the password was? 8-digit. Anyone can break into it. So we had to sit down, work on each process, starting with getting access to the premises, to onboarding the user, how exactly you will have a management. And the fun fact was that we forced them to have induction process where security is part of the team. So we educated them about access policies, not downloading any external software till the time it's approved, and especially around phishing emails, because they were the real challenge at that point of time. People were clicking left, right, and center, and we had to build those exercises for them. So we actually created the whole process as part of the induction, and a checklist wherein they could follow along, and prepare them with like the right mock drills. So every 1 month we were doing some mock drills around something, like a brown bag session we were doing. So we were doing this mock drill for 1 hour, and they were like, now something is going to come. So they were a bit scared, but they were very confident that there's something informative is also going to come.
It's a lot of work, but it sounds like it solved the problem. So that's great.
I'm still at the toothbrushes. We should get that into a t-shirt. Passwords are like toothbrushes.
Don't you?
Liran, I told the same thing in one of the town halls for my company, my previous company, where all the biggies were there. And one of the CISOs came back and said, why do you say toothbrushes? Always say passwords are like undergarments. You never share your undergarments. Why do you share passwords?
Well, there are some stories from the military time. Me and Oren can probably share sometime in the next fun fact, but I'll leave it off.
Is that an underwear fun fact or a toothbrush fun fact? I'm actually not sure which one.
So I'm going to share this one for any junior developers out there, people getting started in development, so that maybe you don't feel so bad if you make a similar mistake or something like that. It's going to happen. It's good to have smart people around you that are there to support you too, and very gracious and making you not feel so bad about doing something incorrectly. So with that said, as a very early on in my career junior developer, I was working on an internal application that was just for employees. And I was learning how to do web development and learning about HTTP verbs. So like get, post, put, patch, delete. And so I was in charge of building out this application, and I was implementing the API endpoints. And for the login, and a lot of folks here are going to be like, oh, they're going to know exactly where we're going here. But for the login, I was sending the credentials via a GET request to the server. And so that's kind of not necessarily a bad thing on the surface of it, but as we go through more, we'll notice more about why this could be bad. So then, I go about doing things, and I'm testing stuff, and we have a lot of logging going on too. And so after I had like my senior developer try things out, test things out, I was looking at the logs, and I was like, uh-oh. And I noticed that because we were logging I was doing some console logging for debugging purposes and stuff like that to see that everything was flowing right. I noticed that their username and password was logged in the HTTP logs, and I I was like, oh shoot, that's not good. And it was very nerve-wracking because I thought like I was going to get in a ton of trouble. Fortunately, this was just a small application, internal, and it wasn't really widely used yet. We're still in active development of it, so it was just me and the other developer that were involved with this. But I was like, I felt so stupid. I felt like, what did I, how could I do this? But it's just a story of these things can happen sometimes, and it's how we respond to it is what matters most. And the fact that I reported it right away to that senior developer, and as I was mentioning earlier, that senior developer was super gracious in handling it with me. And so I was like, "Hey, make sure you rotate your password. You reset your password." And they're like, "Yeah, I'll get to that. Don't worry." So I don't know if that ever happened or not, but those things. That's my one. It's one of my small horror stories, I would say, around security that was specific to me, where I felt terrible. So hopefully, this encourages other folks to like not feel so bad that you're going to be constantly learning and trying to improve and get better at your security senses when building software.
Is that because it was so early on in your career? Is that what sparked the interest in security?
Yeah, a little bit, I would say. Yeah, I would definitely think that that's part of what sparked my interest in it. For sure.
I feel like I should just say, Brian, as someone who's been doing security stuff for a while, like that's nothing. I've done way worse, terrible things. So you should not feel bad about doing that for sure. That's like a very reasonably, a very reasonable thing to learn. And especially if you're new, you should definitely not feel bad about making those types of mistakes. Like they just happen, to everybody.
Yeah. And I think, as everybody's kind of mentioned, that these things have stuck with us that help keep us make sure we don't make those same mistakes moving forward. So, but I probably, I guess what I'm saying with that is, if I hadn't made that mistake as a more junior developer, I probably could have made that mistake as a more senior developer too. So, regardless of experience, I don't know that necessarily would change things in this scenario, right?
Do you feel like this should be something that is, well, part of your curriculum when you're in university or something like that? Because if I recall back to my education, you learn how to develop, but not so much security or whatever, password sanity, or like these kind of things. I made a ton of these mistakes when I was a junior developer. So that makes you think, like, shouldn't we tackle that earlier on before you get started as junior dev?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we could go down a huge rabbit hole discussing that.
Yeah,
What
definitely
should be taught in university and what is currently taught, right?
So a while back, I was doing some PHP web development. And wait, that's not a horror story yet. It gets worse. So yeah, we were doing that. We're building kind of like building on an CMS and a content management system. And you know how it goes, which you develop something and it adds more features and then more features, and it's never ending. It's just more and more features. One of those features that we ended up needing to have was, this was like a very big system, and it needed to also serve a lot of personas across the organization. And it needed to have, currently based on some kind of like feature discovery, a very broad permissions system. So it had many roles, such as moderator, master, admin, I don't know, like a bunch of those roles, like 15 or whatever. And each of them had a ton of permissions, right? Like they would boil down to permissions. And this was just like the story of building basically essentially our own RBAC, role-based access control, but really, really fine-grained. And so keep that in mind. We've done that. And months forward, this is Passover time, Passover Eve. It's a pretty hardcore holiday over here. And I was there with my laptop with the family, because we were a different family. And my manager calls in and he says, "Hey, so we have a problem." I'm like, "Okay, what's up? What's going on?" And he's like, "Could you go on the website and just take a look at some stuff?" I'm looking in and I'm seeing a ton of what call them Viagra related ads, right? Like someone was spamming basically the forum and everywhere else with like Viagra based ads. You could, roll whatever comes to your mind. That's probably the same picture of what was going on there. This was like forum based, internal and external, publicly available. So of course, I'll get to like, we fixed it, but the core problem there is that fine-grained permission system was so big and robust that it actually allowed someone to basically say, anonymous users, they can actually post comments. And that's what ended up happening. Apparently, some bots crawl the web. Someone, some community manager somewhere using this system would actually put that setting on. And there we go. That's how pretty much a lot of garbage and junk got into a system that's supposed to be both internally, but also externally, because it was kind of like forum-based for a software company. So yeah, this is my horror story. And at the very least, it's like, thinking about the features that we develop and like, why is it needed? What is it there? Putting the guardrails in place. There's like a lot of learning from this. But yeah, I mean, this is it. This is bad.
I always wonder why they can't use like cute, puppy and kitten photos instead of, the things they end up putting all over the website.
Yeah. Well,
I feel like it's really challenging with any sort of like forum type thing where there's just like unmoderated posting. Like, since you worked on stuff like that, do you have any suggestions for people building similar things? Because I know like there's a lot of people that work on that type of software to just generally like minimize that type of risk.
I think it's generally like the fact that you sometimes overdevelop, like gold plating is the technical term here, right? Like when we develop things that we are nice to have because we're developers, we want to have those. I especially relate to that with like front end development, right? Like all of the nice and shiny stuff, but it's not really required, and then you end up optimizing it for performance because it's not that good. So you ended up adding something that doesn't really add product value or user value, or maybe just did it because it's fun. But then it causes performance issues. So you do performance problems, you do performance optimization, and then you end up adding security risk and so on and so on. So there's a lot in terms of, I think what's really crucial here is understanding the balance between UX, user experience, or sometimes demands of the users between the security balance, right? Like it would have been amazing to have a password 1234 because I can remember it and sign into every web system all the time. But it's not really a security thing. So no one really does that. And I hope no one really does that. So that's kind of like the balance that you have to have between that friction of what's convenient and, easy to use, but what's actually secure and, private and stuff like that. So do not over-engineer, do not reinvent the wheel, do not reinvent RBAC as much as you can, and follow the standards.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing your security horror stories.